Here we go. Oh my goodness. This is a show that I hate having to do, but I'm glad that there are people that are taking a stand and they're making a difference. And so fasten your seatbelt because we are going to learn and grow together. Normally, Leslie, this is where the music begins, but because we do this live, we do this recording, we're going to do it now. Hello, my listening friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are new to the Lillian McDermott radio show, just know I've been waiting for you. It is my commitment to provide a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It's also my commitment to provide alternative ways to heal. And it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friends, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. So many people, today's topic is a very difficult topic because so many people worry about the strangers that lurk in the dark that can harm us. But what about the loved ones? These people that threaten our very core. No matter your beauty, your intelligence, your education, your health, your wealth, everybody is vulnerable to this topic that we're talking about today. And so I want to introduce you to Leslie Morgan Steiner. She is the author of the book, Crazy Love, and she is going to share her journey today from Harvard graduate to having a gun pointed on her head by someone she thought was her soulmate, the man she thought was her soulmate. And she's also going to share what life can be like after abuse. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Leslie Morgan Steiner is here to do just that. Welcome, Leslie, to the Lillian McDermott radio show.
Thank you, Lily. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I've been waiting for you for such a long time. I think we reached out to you about a year ago. You have been so busy championing men and women that deal with domestic violence, children as well. So share a little bit about your background and what led you down this path.
So I grew up in a family with no violence. My father was a lawyer. My mom was a teacher. I was in Washington, D.C. I never imagined that any man would want to hurt me. I had lots of, men in my life and boys. And it was a real shock to me when right after I graduated from Harvard College, I moved to New York City, got a great job at 17 magazine. And I met a wonderful man who had also just graduated from an Ivy League school, and he worked for an impressive investment bank. And I fell in love with him. And I married him. And it turned out that he had been terribly physically abused as a young boy, and I thought he had been able to leave that behind him, and he wasn't. He brought it into our relationship and our marriage, and he ended up abusing me on a very regular basis for years, and it took me years to leave him. So once I did, I ended up writing the book Crazy Love almost 10 years ago, and it has changed my life. The experience of being an abuse victim and survivor, and then also writing the book and coming out and speaking so publicly about it. And it's an honor to be here today to share my story with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. And we've been waiting a while for this. And so for those of you who are listening to us today on the Lillian McDermott radio show, the book is called Crazy Love, and there's a reason why it's called Crazy Love. And so it is, the author is Leslie Morgan Steiner, and she's not only written this book, she's written other books, but today you can get this book for free for the fourth caller or texter. I want to make this as easy for you as possible. Fourth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. That's 407-373-5959. Now, you wrote this book how many years ago? 2009?
Well, it was published in 2009, but it took me about 10 years to write it, believe it or not. It's a really hard truth to come to, even though I was the one who experienced it. and I knew all of the details. It took me a very long time to admit to myself that I had been a domestic violence victim,
Mm-hmm.
and then to tell the story in a way that other people could hear. And then also, soon after the book was published, I did a TED Talk about why victims stay, because that is the question that everybody asks, is why doesn't she just leave? And I have a lot of answers as to why I and other victims stay. And it's not often what most people think.
Yeah, and that's some of the questions that I have for you, because there is a judgment and a stigma against the person who is being violated. And so not only are you dealing with the grief of and the shame of being a victim, but then having to answer to why you're not leaving, especially when you were keeping everything so quiet until you decided to come out publicly and share what your life had been like. I can't imagine. And so those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. For those of you who know somebody, or maybe it's yourself, we're going to talk about all the things that perhaps maybe you were afraid to talk about, or ashamed to talk about. But this is going to be an opportunity for you to make a plan and see how someone can thrive after domestic abuse. And we're going to continue our conversation with Leslie when we return worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. We'll be right here waiting for you. So that's the deal. That's the deal, that I've never been in a relationship that was abusive, but I dated a guy once that it was between, I had been married before, and I was just newly single. And I remember he was very, 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 very handsome. Everybody loved him. And I felt very honored that he wanted to go out with me. And we had gone out for like maybe a week or so. And I think he wanted to take it to the next level. And when he kissed me, he put his hands around my neck.
Wow.
That gave me the heebie-jeebies. And I never again went out with him after that. So with you, and I want to talk about this on the air as well, you experienced something similar, but at that moment, your compassion was towards him, and you didn't think about yourself, or maybe you didn't understand what had just happened. Did you feel like honored that he liked you? Did you feel, what were some of the thoughts when you're dating someone who could potentially be setting you up to become your the person who violates you?
Well, every domestic violence relationship starts with a fairy tale. But it depends what the fairy tale is for you. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps for you, it might have been that, you were really honored that this man wanted to date you.
Yes.
For me, the dynamic was slightly different. I felt like he saw me. He really saw who I was and loved who I was. Mm-hmm. And that is what kind of cracked me open and made me vulnerable to him. And it's very, very rare that they hit you on the first date. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
If abusers were all like the one who you dated, then we wouldn't have such a big problem, because they would be more transparent. In my case, and in most cases, it's far more subtle. And I didn't see the angry side of him really until we had been together for almost a year and a half.
Mm. And by then you feel that the love is so strong.
Right. I was completely in love with him.
Oh my gosh.
And I was very open to him, as you are when you fall in love. It's magical. And I felt sorry for him, and I trusted him.
Yeah, because
it was a lethal combination.
He was himself a victim.
Right. And that's why it's called crazy love, because it's love, and it's crazy, and it's very dangerous.
Okay. And I see that we're ready to start. And so I do want to talk about on the air that feeling that you experience 5 days. I remember reading 5 days before the wedding. So we'll get started. I want you to share your story now, and we'll dive deeper because we have the extra time on and off the air. Okay, Great. Here we go. Welcome back to the Lillian McDermott radio show, where we always learn and grow together. Today's teacher is author of Crazy Love, Leslie Morgan Steiner, and be the fourth caller or texter to win this book. That's 407-373-5959. This show is dedicated for everybody who has felt like a victim, or someone you love or a victim by someone that you didn't even know. So victims come in so many different, or abusers come in so many different packages. And so I wanted to go deeper because abuse, some people say, well, didn't you see the signs? Or why did you go into this whole thing knowing that he did this? We have to answer to people who don't understand. So help us understand abuse, Leslie.
Exactly. So that's very important. And I think that crazy love is really hard to understand from the outside. And my goal with the book and with my TED Talk was to make people understand what it's really like to fall in love with somebody who ends up hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
And if abusers hit us on the first date or got really angry on the first date, we wouldn't have a second date and we wouldn't be having this conversation. It would be a very easy problem to solve.
Yeah.
But what happens and this is exactly what happened to me, is that abusive relationships always start with a fairy tale. And in my case, I really fell in love with this man. He was funny and kind and self-deprecating and smart. And he adored me. He made me feel so special. He loved that I was smart, that I'd gone to Harvard, that I was working at 17 magazine in New York, that I wanted to help teenage girls. He told me I was the prettiest girl he'd ever dated. It was intensely charming, and not in a fake way. Abusers don't come with a warning label on their forehead. Mm-hmm. He really convinced me that he was the real deal. And I fell very hard in love with him. And I think we all know what happens when you fall in love. You open your heart and soul to another person. And that's what I did. And it made me very vulnerable. It would make anybody vulnerable, regardless of your family background or your education or your income level or your intelligence. This could happen to anybody, male or female. And unfortunately, it happened to me.
Well, it happened to you, but I would say, I'm sorry that it happened to you, but look at how much you've been able to accomplish because it happened to you. You've been able to give this back, which in the show, I talk about the 4 steps of taking responsibility. The 4th and final stage is to help those that use this information for the greater good. And you are definitely doing that in a huge, huge way. And by the way, for those of you who want to watch her TED Talk, it's amazing. That's an amazing eye-opener. And I remember last year doing research on a domestic abuse show that I was doing, and I just love stumbling upon things, and I stumbled upon Leslie's talk that helped me think of abuse in a different way. So let's share your journey 5 days prior to your wedding, this wonderful fairy tale wedding that you're about to have. 5 days prior, what happened?
So it was 7 a.m. And, I don't know about you, but I thought domestic violence happened at night. I was completely unprepared for all of this. 5 days before the wedding, we're both nervous, excited, thrilled. And he got angry because I yelled at my computer. I was frustrated about something, and he strangled me. And he used the chokehold to hit my head up against the wall. Mm. And the whole thing lasted only a few minutes, but it terrified me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. And he was yelling at me the whole time. He was yelling at me that I couldn't shout like that his mother used to shout like that. And it clearly had triggered him in a completely irrational, terrifying way. And I knew what I had to do. I knew I had to call the police, cancel the wedding, tell my friends and family. But my denial crept in, and I was really deeply in love with him. And I felt really sorry for him. He had confessed to me that he was a victim of child abuse, horrific child abuse at the hands of his stepfather, starting when he was 4. And I was a strong, smart, independent woman in love with this man who was troubled and flawed, as we all are. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to help him. And my denial crept in and said that I could handle this. I could take it. That he didn't really mean to hurt me. That he was very sorry, even though he had not apologized. And I knew he was never going to do it again. I was positive he would never do this again because he loved me so much and we had such a wonderful relationship. And I knew he wasn't going to risk losing me. So 5 days later, I stood up in the church. I had put on my mother's wedding dress. The 10 bruises around my neck had just healed so that nobody saw them. And I married him. And then he beat me twice more on our honeymoon.
Mm.
And my crazy love story really started then.
So at that point, at the honeymoon, you're coming back from your honeymoon, and are you thinking, I should leave? At any time, did you think at that moment, I should leave?
Well, research shows that it takes relationship abuse victims an average of 7 attempts before they actually leave. And what that tells us is that it's a process and it takes a very long time. So driving back for our honeymoon, I had a terrible sinking feeling inside me, that I had gotten into something way over my head. And it was terrifying to me. And the worst feeling I'd ever had, that I loved this man. And clearly he was much more trouble than I could have imagined. I think somewhere deep inside me, I knew even then that it was over, but I had just married him.
Yes.
And I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know anything about the patterns of abuse. It's one reason why it's my mission now to talk about this, is that I want to educate other men and women about what this actually looks and feels like. And my friends call me a hope junkie. I have a lot of hope in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that my hope really took over, that he could stop this, that he could get help, that I could help him. And it's only now looking back that I can see how foolish that was. And I understand so much about relationship abuse now, that I understand that I was the last person on earth who could actually help him, because love is what triggers an abuser's terror and their fear. So I was the trigger for him because I loved him. I couldn't help him. I was the one who was making him feel so afraid. Because of what had happened in his childhood, he associated intimacy and love with terror and abuse. So I was the one who scared him every time. And inadvertently, by loving him so much, I was the one who was bringing about this reaction. And it's not that I caused it or that I provoked him, because I didn't. It's much more everything about relationship abuse is much more complicated than people think from the outside. But I was the trigger. And so actually the only thing I could do to help him was to leave. But it took me several years of being abused and being in danger myself before I realized that.
Yeah, and you talk about the statistics of leaving, and the warnings, and why some people stay, because even if they leave, they can come back and kill you. I mean, even if you leave, they can come
Right.
back and hurt your family, your entire family.
Right.
So you were in this relationship for 2 years, 2.5 years?
It was 4 years altogether. I was
4 years.
abused for 2.5 years. And you're exactly right that the most dangerous time in the domestic violence cycle is when you decide to leave. And I knew that somehow. I think most victims do know that once I left him, he would have nothing else to lose, and that then he really would kill me. But I had to leave because the abuse always gets worse. And in my case, it got much worse. And it became clear by the very end that he was going to kill me. He, along the way, bought not one gun, but 2 guns and then 3 guns. He kept them loaded all the time. Every single argument and fight ended with him holding a loaded gun to my head, saying that he was going to pull the trigger. He threatened to kill our dog. He did many, many things to me. He pushed me down the stairs of our home. He pulled out the key in the car ignition as we were driving down the highway. He poured coffee grinds on my head as I was dressing for a job interview. He threw a lot of food at me on the floor, everywhere. You know, he was like a 4-year-old child, because really emotionally, that's where he was. That's where the abuse started for him. And that's the place that he went back to when he got that violently angry. And I still felt sorry for him. And for years, I tried to help him. And we went to see 2 different couples therapists. We tried. I tried everything because I really loved him and I wanted to help him. But it became very clear at the end that I couldn't help him, and that that he was going to kill me.
Okay. And so let's move forward here. What was that moment for you? Because everybody has a moment. Everybody has that. And then I want to continue talking about the signs and talking about, you know, how to make a plan. But for you, because it sounds like to me, for me, I'm looking on the outside. I need to understand. I mean, I would think, because now I'm in judgment of myself, that I would think that I would say, no more, not here after the first time, and say, unless you get help, you're not coming back. but now you're dealing with fear. I'm not dealing with fear because I'm not in the relationship. So help us understand how he's able to continue to abuse you without any consequences for him.
Right. That is true. And I think that you hit the nail on the head, that's the most important thing. The mistake that victims make is that we put the other person first in a way that you can't ever in any kind of healthy relationship. And I just didn't know that was what I was doing. I had no idea. I was completely unprepared for this. And I want to say that there were many warning signs. If I had known more about relationship abuse, I might have picked up on those, even though love can be blind, and I was blinded. But there were very significant warning signs that I'm happy to talk about it at any point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that we've talked about the physical, the violence and control wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you said that if a abuser had a warning sign tattooed on their forehead, there wouldn't be abuse. So everybody is different. So what are some of the warning signs that you can look back now that you say, if I would have known a little bit more, if I would have known a little bit more, then I would have known this as a sign. So what are some of those signs?
I think it's very important to talk about these things because this had the potential to save me. So the first warning sign is that if you're involved with somebody who was physically abused as a child, they have a great propensity for repeating the abuse as an adult, no matter what they say. My ex-husband was very open with me that he had been abused, and he was open with me that he thought it was wrong. And I took that as a sign that he would never hurt me.
Correct.
But he became more at risk for abuse because he had been abused as a child. So that's a very important red flag. Mm-hmm. There are many people who are abused as children who don't repeat the pattern as adults, but it is still a warning sign. Extreme possessiveness early on is also a very big warning sign. But I tell you, these abusers are really good at disguising it.
Manipulation.
And they might say something like, I need to know where you are at every minute of the day because my ex-girlfriend cheated on me. And please, will you let me have your passwords? Will you touch base with me, once an hour and send me a picture? They're good at wrapping it up in what sounds like love. So that's why you have to be very careful about that.
Yes. And so there's, like you said, there's at least four warning signs. Or are those the warning signs that you...
Those are two. Anger is a very big warning sign. Uncontrolled anger. Mm-hmm. My ex didn't show that to me, but that would have been a very big warning sign.
Okay. And so those are some of the things that we need to be aware and take them very seriously. Be the fourth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. Get the book Crazy Love. And we're going to continue our conversation with Leslie Morgan Steiner when we return worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. We'll be right here waiting for you. Okay, so you talked about the warning signs of that there's abuse, the possession, the anger. When I hear people tell me, "Oh, he loves me so much, he doesn't want to be apart from me," or he doesn't feel accepted by the family, my neck hairs just like go up. So your warning signs are right on. But you said you had 4.
Right. So, and maybe there are even more than that.
There's probably
how you divide them. But the other thing that is very clear to me looking back is that he was willing to make a commitment way too early. Mm. He gave me a key to his apartment when we'd only been dating for a few weeks. He asked me to marry him when we had been dating for only a few months. And those are warning signs now, but at the time, Lily, I have to tell you, it just felt wonderful. It felt like I'd found the one man in New York City who was willing to make a commitment, who was open and transparent and loving. So abusers are very good at wrapping these warning signs in what looks and feels like love. Mm. So it's very hard to spot them. The other warning sign is that when somebody who you are dating wants you to keep a secret. And he wanted me to keep a secret. And the secret was very romantic, and that was that we had gotten engaged. But he asked me to keep it a secret from everybody for a little while. And secrets isolate you from other people. And that's the next phase of every relationship abuse cycle, is isolation from your family and friends and coworkers, because it's obviously much easier to abuse somebody if they're isolated. And that's what Connor started doing to me. He started to separate me from my coworkers. He eventually got me to quit my job and work as a freelancer. He got me to mistrust my family. He got my family very angry at me. So he was kind of separating me from the herd, if you will, my own human herd, because it would be much easier for him to abuse me. But all of this happens before there's any anger, before he's punching the wall, before he does anything to you. So it makes it really hard to spot.
Oh my gosh, it's divide and conquer.
Right.
Or conquer and divide, or I don't know how it goes, but we see it. And I'm sure that you sitting on the other side now of abuse, you probably see it and you sense it, and you're in every core of your being. How do you keep yourself from calling someone that you love an abuser, or accusing someone of abuse? And that's something that maybe we can talk about on the air. How do you not believe everybody is an abuser?
Well, like
after
you,
going
I
through
now have really good radar for what is abuse and what are the warning signs. At the time I didn't, but it's so very different. Love is very different than abuse. And once you know what some of the warning signs are, you do get very adept at telling the two apart. That's the good news.
Yeah. And the denial that you have felt that at that beginning, I'm sure that you are like, bring it. You're like, today you are so different than the person you were.
It's true.
So let's
the
talk.
Upside of being a survivor is that, and the very good news.
Yes. And a survivor who has done the work on yourself, because, many people bear the shame. They bear the shame of telling somebody that if there's something wrong with me. I remember that my first time walking down the aisle with someone who was very neglectful in the marriage, very neglectful. And I remember not wanting to walk down the aisle. I told my dad I could not let go. And my dad said, I can't let go of you either, Lily. And he pushed me down the aisle in roller skate because I was no longer going to be his responsibility. And I married him. The people were there because of looking good, because I didn't want to, my parents had spent a lot of money. I didn't want to make any waves. I ignored my intuition.
Right. And that's a very dangerous thing to do.
And so my children, every single one of them, I've said to them, I don't care how much money we've spent. I don't care if we're at the church. I don't care. You tell me I don't want to walk down that aisle, and we are turning really quickly and we are running away. The second time,
very good.
The second time, and we're going on a honeymoon, but they would want to go on with me. But the second time and the last time I walked down that aisle, I remember telling my dad, I can let go now. Our intuition is so on.
It's true. We as women, unfortunately, everybody is taught to, especially if you grow up in any kind of alcoholic or troubled, abusive home, you're taught to ignore your intuition as a kid. But women in particular, I think, are taught to ignore our intuition. And it's very dangerous. And I also want to say that what you felt walking down the aisle, or before that your first husband was neglecting you. Neglect is a form of emotional abuse. And emotional abuse is just as dangerous as physical abuse. It's not a crime, and it's harder to spot, but it's just as dangerous. And women do it to men just as much as men do it to women.
Yes. And I've said that if neglect could make you, if you could be bloody with neglect, then people would recognize it as abuse. But neglect it does a lot. It does a lot for your spirit.
I know.
And that's why I felt honored that this very jockey kind of guy was interested in me. This tiny little, girl. But at that moment, I stopped ignoring my intuition. There were so many times in my life, even after that, I ignored my intuition. There's so many times in our life, but I don't do that anymore. But who knows? There could be a moment of weakness. You just never know. You can't say I'll never do anything, because that's the moment you become most vulnerable.
Right. And certain abusers are able to really look for that weakness in potential victims and exploit it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I see that we're ready to get started. And this is where I talk a little bit about my website, and then
Okay,
I will reintroduce you. Okay.
great.
Here we go. Oh, I forgot okay, here we go. Welcome back to the Lillian McDermott radio show, where you can hear us worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. I am your host, Lillian McDermott, and it is my goal that we learn from each other. Go through life with this childlike wonder, with curiosity instead of criticism, which is so important when we're dealing with people that have experienced domestic abuse, whether you're a child or the victim or the abuser. Everybody can get help, but each one needs to seek the help, needs to want the help. And unfortunately, that love that we feel is like kryptonite. It alienates us to everybody. And today we are talking to Leslie Morgan Steiner. Her website is lesliemorgansteiner.com. If you want to learn more about the work she's doing, her TED Talk, and all the speaking engagements that she's in, and be the fourth caller or texter, 407-373-5959, and win a free copy of Crazy Love. So today we're talking about what I had mentioned before with Leslie, is that she is in the fourth stage of taking responsibility for her life. You know, there's so many different ways that we blame others for our lack, or blame others for the life we're not living. But the reality is, in every situation, if we take 100% ownership of our life and how we created our life, whether it was intentional or not intentional, whether you were a victim or not a victim, we all, if we take that responsibility, we're not talking about blame, shame, fault, or duty. We're talking about empowerment and freedom, which led her and all of us to that freedom that allows us to see on the other side of the coin, the other side of the shadow, the other side of whatever is there. And so I want to encourage you to go to whenyouneedafriend.com. That is where we take 100% responsibility for our life, owning the life we want to live. And so when you go to whenyouneedafriend.com, you get lots of free gifts. And one of the things that you get is that you'll be able to get the show sent right to your phones or tablets. While you're at whenyouneedafriend.com, click on all the different icons for my social media. Follow me on social media. Follow me on my podcasts, also on my YouTube channel. While you're listening to our wonderful sponsors, we're having conversations that are deeper than we can have on the air. There is never enough time to learn from all the teachers on the Lillian McDermott radio show. While you're at whenyouneedafriend.com and you subscribe, make sure that you check out my sponsors. Without my sponsors, this show would not happen. This is a free show that you can learn and grow with me. There's so many different things that we have preconceived notions that if you learn a new truth, just like Leslie is teaching us today, the other side of abuse, so that we can understand, walk a mile in those shoes, that perhaps we can understand what happens to her happens to us. We're all in this together. Be the fourth caller or texter, 407-373-5959, and win a free copy of the book, Crazy Love. Okay, so Leslie, thank you so much for sharing this topic. It is such a difficult topic because it has such a negative, like if something is wrong with you, you were the one that was violated, you were the one that became the victim. But why is it that we look at the victims just as critically as we look at the abuser at times?
Well, even more so actually, because everybody asks, why didn't she just leave? Why did she stay? But nobody asks, why is he abusing her? And domestic violence and sexual assault are two crimes where, unfortunately, most victims are women and the victims are blamed. And, you know, it wasn't my fault that I was being abused. I knew that at the time. Shame is a terrible thing to battle in this. And I would say to any victim out there, try to let go of the shame, because it is not your fault. The only person who is responsible for the abuse is the abuser. And that is their problem to solve. but I do also believe that no hurt is wasted. And I really learned so much from being a domestic violence victim and a survivor. And it gave me a lot more faith in myself and in my own inner strength, a tremendous amount of compassion for other victims. And it also educated me so much about the power of love. The love is very strong and very wonderful, but it also can make us really vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of caution and respect for love is very important. And I also want to add that although my story is a really painful one of extreme physical violence, my ex-husband had 3 loaded guns that he used all the time to threaten me and terrify me, that emotional abuse is just as bad as physical abuse. And in some ways, I think it's worse because it's harder to spot. It's not a crime. And the damage stays for maybe even longer than physical violence. And neglect is a kind of emotional abuse. Gaslighting is abuse. And it's a kind of dynamic that happens. Women do it just as often as men, and bosses do it. Sometimes parents do it to their children and to each other. And it's really quite dangerous. And it's something that we all need to become much more educated about. Love is not supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to feel bad. It's supposed to feel good.
Correct. And there in every situation, in every relationship, maybe there's words, and we're not talking about that kind of thing where, you correct and you work together and you're equal in the relationship. We're talking abuse. We're talking about, when you talk about gaslighting, share a little bit about gaslighting for people who have not heard about it, because I just learned about gaslighting and I would love to do a show on that too.
It's a really complicated topic because it's hard to explain. Mm-hmm. It's not black and white. It's not black and blue like abuse is. So I'll give you some examples of gaslighting. In general, it's when your partner or an authority figure in your life tries to make you feel responsible for something that you haven't actually done.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, for instance, say you have a partner who's really paranoid about you cheating. Which does sometimes happen, that they're afraid. But instead of saying, hey, look, I have this paranoia, I'm really worried that I'm just insecure and I get afraid. Instead of coming to you with that true vulnerability, they might say, it's your fault that I'm afraid that you're cheating because you wear those short skirts and you go out and you're clearly having way too much fun. Mm-hmm. And you're so independent and you won't answer my texts all the time. So they make the shame and the blame attached to you when you're just out there living your life and being the same person that they fell in love with.
Yeah, those are great examples that, like you said at the beginning when we were talking on the show, that some of the things that an abuser uses, some of the emotions that, or the attributes that they have seem like love. They might be an illusion of what we think is love. Like, want to be with you all the time, want you to call him all the time, want you to, but those things are not sustainable. They're not sustainable. And so those are signs that, at first, you can't get enough of each other, but eventually that's going to wean off. And if it doesn't wean off, that could be that person trying to control and manipulate your whole life. Now, you have given 3, and during the break, we talked about a couple more of the signs of abuse. So I want to encourage you to go to whenyounneedafriend.com and check out this video because there's not, we can't cover everything at all times. There's also a domestic wheel. It's a domestic violence and control wheel that I will be posting on the website. But let's talk about at what moment, Leslie, did you say, I'm going to make a plan, I am going to get out? What did you do? How fearful were you at that moment? Where did you get your strength? So share that story.
Well, for me, there was one moment, but many moments led up to it, which is really typical for relationship abuse survivors. And I have realized that the abuse really was his fault and that I kind of had one last chance to get him to stop. So I had a very candid conversation with him. I told him, he's my husband. I said, I will not have children with you until you've dealt with this and stopped abusing me. And I will leave you if you ever hit me again. And it was sort of like my line in the sand. And he was wonderful about it. He cried. He told me that I was the most important woman in the world to him. I was his family. He said all the right things. And then he followed it up with action, which is that he didn't abuse me for 6 months. And in the life of an abuse victim, 6 months without a beating is a really long time. So I thought that he was done. I thought he had addressed it and listened to me and somehow sort of fixed it, or at least gotten a toehold in fixing what was wrong with him. And then one night, it was like a dam burst in him. And he got angry with me and he lost all control. And this is what led up to the moment when I knew I had to leave. And he barricaded me in our bedroom. He had a black belt in karate and a black sash in kung fu. And he beat me for hours. And I don't remember most of the beating because he strangled me into unconsciousness repeatedly. And he broke my favorite wedding picture over my head. He ripped all my clothes off. I was on the floor for much of the attack. He was kicking me and hitting me. And it was like nothing I had ever experienced in my life. But even with him, there had never been as bad a beating as this one. And I knew he was going to kill me. And there's nothing like that feeling that it's bad enough if it were a stranger who had broken into my home and was assaulting me. But this was a man who I loved, who I had made love with earlier that day. I trusted him, and I thought he was my soulmate. And here he was going to kill me. And that changed something in me forever.
Okay. And it's hard for me to listen to this, and I know it's hard for you, but this is happening all the time. The statistics are unreal. The book is called Crazy Love, Leslie Morgan Steiner, and we're going to continue our conversation worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. Be the fourth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. It is so difficult to hear. And it's a story that we can all relate to at one point or another, whether it's happened to you or it's happened to someone you love. And I do, and I'm so sorry this has happened to you. But at the same time, I'm so grateful that you took that experience and you're using it for your platform. You're using it to help others. Now, when we come back from the break, I do want to talk about that, because we only have one segment.
I know. We could spend all day talking about this, right? It's
I know. It is. I do want to talk about how to help someone.
Yes. I have a very good story about how I was helped and how I try to help other people.
Okay.
And how there are a couple of very simple things that everybody can do.
Okay. So for now, let's continue off the air. You can share the story, but without talking about how we can help, how we can be of help. So at that moment, this is it for you.
Right.
Do you play dumb? Do you play along?
Yep.
How do you do it?
So what I did, and I think for everybody it's different, but for me, I was saving my own life. I was really scared. So I told him that I took back my ultimatum. Of course, I understood why he was doing this. I felt so sorry for him. I wasn't going to leave him. Everything was going to be just fine. I loved him so much. I've never lied. I think it's the only time in my life that I've lied. But I was doing it to save my own life. And so I got him to stop. And as soon as he left, I did something I'd never done before. I broke the silence by picking up the phone and calling the police and asking for help. So I broke the silence and I asked for help. And that was a huge turning point.
And prior to that, you were living in the city, and then he takes you off into this like tiny little place where you don't know anybody.
Totally
you don't know,
vulnerable.
Totally isolated. Got your family upset with you. You were upset with your family because now you're this unit, and it's us against them, and all of those things that happened to you. So we hear about people that leave and come back. And leave and come back. And everybody knows that they're being abused. They leave and come back. But with you were one. That was one and done, right?
No, he abused me for so long. But I did leave many times. But I left for like 10 minutes.
But you left quietly. You didn't
I didn't tell anybody. Right.
But what about the people that everybody knows they're being abused?
Right.
They leave, they call the police, they put the police in danger, and then they come back. They go to the shelter and they come back.
Yep, that happens all the time.
Yes, but with you broke the silence, and once you broke the silence,
I was very serious about it.
You were done.
I still wanted to go back, but I had so many people helping me. I had like an army of friends and family, and they stopped me from going back. I needed all of those people.
Absolutely. The same people that you were isolated from. The
Exactly. I
same
needed all those people.
people.
And they were patient and kind. Thank goodness.
That's
They
wonderful.
understood. They somehow understood what I was going through and didn't judge me.
And because you're judging yourself.
Well, and I was just traumatized. I didn't know what had happened. And I think I looked tough from the outside, but I was very fragile on the inside. And I needed all that love and help. And the only reason I'm here today is because I got that help.
Okay. So there's so many domestic abuse hotlines. There's so many shelters, and there's Salvation Army has the domestic violence abuse. There's one right here in Brevard County that's they have a violence program. There's halfway houses. There's so many, but yet with all of that, still the idea is, who's going to help me? I'm going to be homeless. Those are thoughts that keep coming in to the mind of the person who is being violated.
Right.
And so let's break those myths too.
Okay.
About the help. Okay, right. So here's the last segment, Leslie. I'm so sorry. Part two coming to soon. Okay, so we're about to get started. Welcome back to the Lillian McDermott radio show, where we always learn and grow together. Today's teacher is Leslie Morgan Steiner. I've been waiting for her for over a year, and I'm so glad that she's been able to come and share her story. But her story is not of abuse as much as it is of a story of what's after abuse, what you can do after abuse, the story of hope. Like she said at the beginning, that she was a hope junkie. I think she still is. Not was. I think she still is. And so with that, we're giving away this book, or she's giving away the book called Crazy Love. Be the fourth caller or texter, 407-373-5959. There are a lot of shelters. There's a lot of places that can help for if you are being abused, whether you're a man, a woman, or child. There are so many places. But Leslie, all we hear about is what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the children? What's going to happen to me? Will I be homeless? So for you, how did you get help, and how can others get help?
Well, I was desperate. I was sure that he was going to kill me. And I decided that I didn't want that to happen. And so I would have done anything that the police told me to do the night that I called them. I filed a temporary restraining order. I got help from the local domestic violence shelter. I told my friends and family. My mother gave me money. I had a lot of people, a lot of family and friends, but also a lot of strangers who really came out of the woodwork to help me. And I needed every single one of them. It was very hard to leave an abuser. It was dangerous. And I still wanted to give him yet another chance because I was still hooked in to the magical power that he had over me. And the love, that hope that we could recapture that original love was very hard to let go of. But I was terrified of him. And that helped me too, that I didn't have any denial anymore. I knew he was going to kill me if I let him. And so I restarted my life, and it was very difficult. And I needed a lot of help. And I got it. I'm very lucky that I got so much community and family support. And I broke the silence again and again. I told people again and again, the very people I've been lying to for years, I told them that I had been lying and that I was sorry and that I needed their help. And I restarted my life at 27. And I was very, very fortunate that I was able to completely rebuild my life. And most victims are like me. I'm a very typical victim in so many ways. And that once I decided to really leave, and I successfully left, I never repeated the mistake. I haven't been in an abusive relationship again. And you'd never know if you met me randomly that I was an abuse victim. And that's where the hope lies, that if we understand domestic violence and we help victims, we can help other people and their children rebuild their lives free of violence.
That's right. And you were able to have a relationship with a wonderful, wonderful gentleman that you talk about him in your TED Talk that you did as well, and have 3 beautiful children, and
who've never known any violence in their life. They're completely free of it. 3 thriving, wonderful, amazing kids. So I'm very lucky. There's a lot of hope, not just for me, but for any victim out there. And also, I think there's a lot of hope for abusers too. The stigma is, as people understand more the abuse dynamic, it's easier for abusers to get help as well. And they were victims once too, so they need help as well.
Yeah. And when you think of someone like that, you want to have compassion for them. You want to be able to, but not in your territory. They can
You don't want to feel sorry for them.
That's right.
Pity is a red flag. If there's any adult out there who expects you to feel sorry for them, run in the other direction. Because pity is a very dangerous emotion. It feels a lot like love. So I think that abusers have to be held accountable for their actions. That's part of their healing, but they need help too. They just don't need help from the victims. We are not the people who can help them. They need professionals. This is a very, very tricky thing, and they need the pros.
I love how you said, we can't help them. We're the triggers.
We are. Intimacy is what triggers abuse.
Wow. And so holding the abuser accountable is crucial. And even if you want to recapture, like you said, you were trying to recapture that original unicorn of love, this illusion of happily ever after. Even if you want to do that, you can do it from afar. You can love people from afar. Right. And so that addiction to the chaos, that addiction to the drama, I hear that you had that it was
a drug addiction, really. In some ways, it's like you hear drug addicts talk about chasing that first high. That's what I was like. The fairy tale felt like this nirvana. It felt like I'd never been so loved and understood and cherished. And I wanted to get back to that. And it took a very long time and a lot of beatings before I understood that it was just an illusion and that we were never getting back to it, and that it really hadn't been real, that's not love. Love and abuse never really go together. And true love is never crazy.
That's right. That's right. They could have crazy moments or crazy awesome moments, but that kind of crazy, not kind of crazy.
Exactly.
I want to say this number. It's 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-7233, which is the National Abuse Hotline. This show is heard worldwide. So in the nation, that is a number that you can call. There's also thehotline.org. There are safe houses. Now and I was sharing this off the air with you, Leslie, that we also can put a lot of pressure on people that are in denial. We know that they are in an abusive relationship, but we don't want to accuse. We don't want to step in or destroy the relationship that we have with our friends. What can we do as friends and loved ones of people that we know they're in a violent situation or abusive situation? How can we love that person without feeling that alienation that is purposeful alienation?
The most important thing you can do is learn as much about relationship abuse as possible. There's a lot online that's available, and you can call the hotline too. Friends and family can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline to get advice and to learn more. But when you understand more about it, what you'll understand is that we victims look very tough. We have to be tough to survive abuse, but we're actually very fragile inside. So we don't need somebody just storming into our life saying, you're an abuse victim, you're so stupid for loving this person, he's a monster, she's a monster, I'm going to rescue you. We don't need any of that drama. We just need very gentle help. And the most important thing you can do for a victim is let them know that you care about them, and also to break down their denial. And that's what happened to me. I had a very good friend who all he said to me was, I'm worried about you. I see that something's wrong here. I don't know what it is, but I need to know that you are safe. Mm-hmm. That's all he said. You could say that to anybody. And it just takes a few seconds. And it's not confrontation. It's just love and caring. And when my friend said that to me, it broke all of my denial. And it took me another almost 2 years to leave. But it was when that friend said that the journey began for me, for figuring out how I was going to leave. Because he broke my denial, and I knew that he knew what was happening and that he cared. And that was transformational for me.
Wow,
and you can do that for anybody. Yeah.
Any other words of advice is, if we know somebody is in an abusive relationship, what else can we do?
Okay, this is a really hard one. You have to stay close to the victim, and you have to stay close to the abuser. Don't let the abuser push you away. That's what they're going to try to do. And the more you love the victim, the harder they're going to try to alienate you and make you mad at the victim. Stay close to the victim. Try to make plans with the couple. Invite them into your home. Do everything you can to stay close so that when he or she does reach out for help, you're there. And just love the victim so much. It's very tempting to get angry at them, but that is the last thing on earth that you can do, and that will not help them. Just love them and try to have as much compassion as you can. And trust me, it's hard to do. I know it's very hard to help victims.
It is. You have to become a very good actor so
Yes,
that the Emmy Award goes to
especially
you.
when children are involved. When you're afraid that the children are going to be hurt, it takes it to a whole nother level.
Because the alienation is by design. They
It
want
is.
to push.
Right.
They want to push you away so that you're not
Exactly.
seeing what's happening to your loved one.
Right.
And
That's
so,
exactly
keeping your friends close and your enemies closer is a
right.
very, very wise. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful. I'd love to continue having these conversations from time to time because this abuse affects. We haven't even gone into statistics, but I'm the book has statistics. There's just so many different ways that you can learn about abuse. I will have the abuse in power, or abuse and control wheel.
Right, that's very important.
Yes, and so we can recognize it. The book is called Crazy Love, 407-373-5959. Be the fourth caller or texter to win this book. Leslie, thank you so much for everything that you are doing to create awareness that we are not alone.
Thank you, Lily. It's true. None of us are alone. It might feel that way, but we've all got each other. And you can leave an abusive relationship. There's a lot of hope out there.
And we're going to talk about that when we get off the show. And please remember, I'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job. Good. That's the best ever. Okay. So that's, I don't want to end the show with what we ended up with. I do want to end the show because I'm a hope junkie too.
Okay.
You know, you spot it, you got it. So I see it in you. I am the same way. So how have you been able to heal? Share how you have been able to heal and be able to, I was looking at your book and you were talking about your soulmate, your true soulmate, what you were looking, the 10 things. And you know what? I thought I marked it, but I didn't mark it in the book. The 10 things that you were looking for. And here it is. It's in page 291. I think that is so important. So let's talk about manifesting and how you've been able to put the pieces together, because just like your ex-husband was suffering from PTSD, which you could recognize it as PTSD with triggers that made it, but he wasn't unwilling to do anything about it.
Right.
But with you now have PTSD. Right. How have you healed that in your life?
Well, I worked with a therapist for a long time. That helped a lot. I tried very hard to forgive myself. I did a lot of self-help and a lot of therapy. And I love that that list that I put together of the top 10 things I wanted in a partner.
You want to share it? Do you have it? Do you have the book?
The first 5 were non-negotiable. I have them mostly memorized. You know, some of them, I needed somebody kind. I needed somebody who I would want to pick as my own father. I thought that was a very good one.
Yes.
I needed somebody who had good self-esteem and was solid in their own way. But I tell you, that list helped me find good people. But this is a lifetime journey for any abuse survivor to learn to trust themselves again and to love again. But I also think even if you weren't abused, I think this is one of the things that most people learn in their life is how to love themselves and how to have true intimacy with other people. And I am still learning that. It is a long, long, long journey. And my progress has been slower than I would like because abuse comes in many forms. And I actually ended my second marriage after 20 years of being together and having 3 kids because I realized he wasn't meeting my needs either. And that there was a lot of neglect going on and that my standards had gotten higher. And so when I left my first husband, I made a promise to myself that I've never broken, which is that I would not tolerate abuse from anybody. Mm-hmm. And that's the bedrock for me. And that's an easy thing to remember, easier than 10 things on a list. But I've held true to that. The unfortunate thing is sometimes it takes a very long time to realize that you're being abused. It took me a long time to see that I was a victim of physical violence, and it took an even longer time to see that I was a victim of emotional neglect and abuse. Mm-hmm. So there are no easy answers, even for me,
Yeah.
Even given everything that I've gone through.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because I picked that up. I did not know if you had ended your marriage or not, but I kind of picked that up. But I wasn't 100% sure. It's not in your bio.
Right.
And so, but I think I'm so grateful that you did talk about it and that you have. And so as I was looking at your list, and I wrote an article called, Be Your Own Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
At whenyouneedafriend.com for those of you who would like to learn about my writing for Florida Today. It's called Be Your Own Valentine. I think that's the name of it. And so it's the only article that I've written that if you want the true ending of the article, you have to email me after you write. Yes. So in the article, I asked people to write 25 attributes that they want in a mate. So when I was looking at your attributes, that I think that if you could divide them, you probably have 25.
That's probably true.
Yeah, because you lump goodness and
Right.
kindness and all that, and all of that. And I talk about all these attributes, 25, at least 25 attributes, and then circle the deal breakers. Those
right.
deal breakers, because you go out with these people, you'll say,
right.
okay, well, I didn't like that, or maybe.
I know, but nobody's perfect, and part of
right.
life is accepting that no one's perfect and you're not perfect.
That's right. That's right.
Confusing, right?
It is. So I have them write the person of my dream. So it's if a man, if you like a man, if it's a woman, the man of my dream must be. And mm-hmm. So those are the 25 attributes. And when they write back to me, what I tell them to do is that in order to attract these attributes, I must become.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's true.
I must become those 25 things.
Right.
Because we expect it in others, but we seldom expect it in ourselves.
I know. And that kind of love, self-love, and openness and transparency and vulnerability, it can be contagious in a really good way.
Yeah.
Just as abuse can be contagious in a bad way. But I've had times where I've been out on dates with people and they've told me all about themselves, and I've said, well, that's so wonderful, but now can you really tell me who you are? Don't tell me where you went to school, all of that. That's great.
Yes.
But tell me, who are you really? And it's like a different person that comes through. Yeah. And that's where I want to meet people. That's where real intimacy is. And that's what I have with my friends. I think it's harder to have it with a romantic partner because there's so much going on. There's the physical attraction. There's your hopes and dreams. There are other things that make it more complicated. But I think it's a very worthy goal.
Yeah. And so it's a work in progress. I always say that you don't just breathe once.
Right. That's true.
And say, I'm done.
Right.
And then you go, oh, I'm not done yet. I got to drink, so that's right. What healing is like.
It's
and
true.
I remember standing.
That's what life is like. Yeah.
I'm a certified life coach. And when I went back to work on myself, it was about when I entered my 50th. So I was 47 years old when I entered. I just started doing the radio show, and I thought, if I want my listeners and followers to grow, I must grow too. Mm-hmm. And so I went to that, and I remember dealing with discovering a bunch of stuff that I didn't even know that was affecting me, right?
Right.
And so just about a year ago, I went to this retreat. And I am now in a retreat with other coaches that have done a lot of work. And I'm like the newbie in this group. And the facilitator asked me to share something that I have shared time and time again on the show with my friends and in life. And he asked me the question one more time. And I thought I was going to give him a question from my head. And what ended up happening, Leslie, is my lips started quivering. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And here are a bunch of well-educated people. And I'm like, oh my God. I just started to cry. And he asked, why the tears? And I said, I have dealt with this before. And everybody that was in the room laughed out loud because they felt my pain.
Right.
And they also felt my awareness.
Right. And they've been there before,
And
and they probably knew you were in just the right place and that you were going to be fine. Yeah. I know. It's true. Life is funny. And it's true. We don't breathe once. We just have to keep on breathing.
That's how healing happens.
Right.
And forgiveness. Just when you think you've forgiven someone and something happens to trigger one more time, I got to forgive. And it's usually forgiveness of self. And it's amazing. And I'm grateful that you have been able to share your journey. But as I'm looking at your book and I'm learning about you, and I'm thinking, you have PTSD too, because you now were abused. And what are your triggers? And I'm not saying that as a judgment. Right. I'm thinking anyone who has gone through trauma is now traumatized, and the cycle continues.
Right. It's true.
How do you stop it? What do you think is the most helpful thing for you at this point? Anyone that you could talk to, someone who is being abused or has walked away and now is feeling all the stresses that are triggers that could occur from the previous relationship?
I think that the most important thing is to be very kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's a really hard thing to do. It sounds so simple. It sounds sort of corny too, like to be your own best friend. Take your own side in the argument. See yourself with compassion. Say it out loud. I forgive you. I forgive you for the mistakes you've made. You're imperfect, but I love you anyway. All of those things, I think that helps a lot. That kind of self-love, coupled with self-awareness. I'm a big fan of telling yourself the truth. I think it's a very hard thing to do, especially if you've been through trauma, but very powerful. And sometimes you're the only person you need to tell the truth to, and you can be safe with yourself.
I like that. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Well, thank you so much. This is wonderful. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to hear
I'm looking forward to you coming back, because there's so many different judgments and different.
There's a lot to talk about, right? I agree.
There is a lot. It's not a one and done. Right. And so for those of you who are watching today, if you have experienced domestic violence, share it. Break the silence.
Right. Break the silence. The most powerful thing you can do. Right.
I think that was probably your moment, that you broke the silence, but you were determined. You were determined.
I knew I had to tell everybody and that they had to help me. And I'm still breaking the silence today. And that's what I encourage everybody to do, to talk openly about their own experiences, to talk about what they listened to today on your show, to bring your children and your coworkers and all of your loved ones into this honesty, so that you can help each other and have a dialogue about it. And also you're setting yourself up as somebody who will help them in the future if they ever are abused themselves. And that's a very powerful thing to do too.
Yes.
You never know when they're going to need your help.
Yes. And when I coach somebody that has been in a relationship and they're going into the next relationship, I beg them. I say, please work on yourself. Just keep working on yourself, because the moment another person comes in, you stop growing. So work to that person that's on your list. Become that person on your list. And then if you want to have a relationship, now you're stronger and you can have this, because after a relationship ends, we are the most vulnerable. Because for me, what happened with me, I was neglected in my first marriage, to the point where my first husband abandoned our children. Not just, abandoned our children. And so, so when I met someone that was just like thought I was the best thing, and I was like, oh my God, she's so wonderful. When you're hungry, McDonald's tastes good. No offense to McDonald's, but when you are hungry and you're thirsty and anything is good. So what I recommend for people to do in any relationship, whether it's ended or you want to find a relationship, is continue to become that person that you're trying to attract. And then once you're strong, attract them.
Right.
Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
But anyway, that's what I did. But I learned from lots of trial and error. Let me just put it that way.
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Oh, Lily, thank you.
I appreciate it. And for those of you who have watched this video to the end, give me the thumbs up, share this video with all your friends, and let's grow the show together. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.